What's up, guys, and welcome back to Texas Fishing Force. I'm Mike, and today I want to talk about some of my absolute favorite lures. 5 lures that I use all the time for redfish, trout, and flounder. And these lures, if you aren't using them already this year, well, you should be. All right, 5 lures that if you aren't using already, you absolutely should be. Now, this list isn't in any specific order. Every one of these lures has different applications and different purposes, and we're going to discuss that. And we're also going to discuss why these are some of my favorite lures. Let's get into it. All right, number 1 is a bait I've been using for many, many years. I absolutely love it. It's great for trout. It's great for redfish, great for flounder. It's probably one of the most versatile baits on the market, and that is the K-Wiggler ball tail. As you can see, it looks a lot like a regular paddle tail, except for on the tail, it has a ball instead of a paddle. Because of that, it has next to no resistance in the water, which means that there's, no limit on how fast or how slow you can pull this through the water. It can do a ton of different things. It's great if you're fishing for redfish because you can drag this across the bottom really, really easy. It's also a bait that you can bounce on the bottom and really get that tail moving as it's bouncing across the bottom of the water. It's also great, when you're fishing for redfish and you come up on a school. I like to cast this way in front of them and just pause, let it sit there. And then as they get a little bit closer, start bouncing it and let that tail, all of that crazy action in that tail, draw their attention over to it. It's one of those baits that, it's just fantastic. But this bait really excels when it comes to fishing for trout. This is absolutely my favorite bait for trout fishing, and there's a few reasons. Again, there's next to no resistance on this, and so you can zip this through schools of trout really, really quickly, get that reaction bite. Anything that's moving like that in the water, it's going to get their attention. Yeah, so it's just fantastic for trout. Another thing, because again, it has next to no resistance, when you stop reeling this, it drops really, really quickly. Which is super, super beneficial because for a lot of us, we know that, some of those smaller trout, they'll school up on the top of the water, but underneath that is where you'll sometimes find some of those bigger trout or even schools of redfish that will chase those small schools of trout around. So you want to drop a bait below that, a little bit lower into the water column to really try to find those bigger trout, those redfish, the fish that we're looking for, right? Now, generally speaking, if you're not using something like this, if you're using a paddle tail that descends slowly, a lot of times what we have to do is we have to switch jig heads to a heavier jig head, and we cast into the group and we let it drop as fast as we possibly can so that we can get below those smaller trout and get to the bigger fish. This, you don't need to do that because when you stop reeling, this drops really, really quickly. This is a bait that I'll cast into the school of trout and just let it drop for a few seconds, and then I start jerking it into the water, really hoping to get the reaction on some of those bigger fish. And putting this on is a lot quicker than cutting off a jig head, retying a heavier one on, putting another bait back on. This is one that you can swap out really, really quickly. But when I'm fishing for trout, I pretty much always have one of these tied on because it's just an extremely versatile bait. It works fantastic for trout. Again, probably my favorite bait, my favorite lure by far when it comes to trout fishing. All right, number 2 is a lure I absolutely love using to catch redfish, specifically in shallow water, in the marshes, in the back lakes, or even some of the shallow bays. Generally water that's 2-3 feet deep. This works fantastic, and it's a crankbait. But specifically, it is the Man's Baby 1 Minus. Now, I don't see a lot of recreational fishermen using this. However, it's pretty common in the tournament scene. I know some people are probably going to be upset that I'm giving that away, but it's just such a great crankbait. It's got a really, really small bill, so it is a super shallow running crankbait. Only drops down a little bit. Has a ton of movement, has a rattle. This moves a ton in the water, and it's also a great bait for people that are new to artificial because it's really, really easy to use. You cast it out. The moment you start reeling it, you're going to feel that vibration, and if you can feel the vibration in the tip of your rod, well, you're doing it right. Another thing that I really like to do is how I'll cast it out, I'll start reeling it in, get that vibration going, and then I'll just pause and stop and let this thing float back up to the surface, and then I'll start reeling again and then let it float back. It has a ton of movement in the water, has a ton of vibration, lots of sound. It's just a great bait in the shallow waters in the marshes and the bays. It's a great lure for catching redfish. I've also caught a lot of flounder on this as well. So yeah, it's just one of those great lures that I always have on the boat, especially when I'm fishing the back lakes and the marshes. All right, now you guys know I can't make a list of my favorite baits without adding the Corky Fat Boy. Yeah, super versatile bait. It's a bait that I love to catch trout on. Very customizable. You can move this around, really soft bait. I do have a lot of videos on this in the past. If you haven't checked those, I'll put a link above. Those videos go into a lot more detail on how to use this, what they're used for, but in a gist, it is a slow descending soft bait, so you can throw it out, let it descend, and then really work it into a very specific part of the water column. Very easy to cast these, very easy to work these. Just an all-around great bait. I think more trout have been caught on Corkies when it comes to artificial baits than pretty much anything else. Very fun bait. Now, a lot of people say that this is a fall and wintertime only bait, and that's just not the case. This is a year-round bait. I love to throw this in the summer when a lot of guys are throwing croaker or live croaker. In fact, look at that. Looks just like a croaker. Yep. But yeah, I use this year round. In fact, I catch fish, just as many fish in the summer and in the spring as I do in the fall and the winter on Corkies. Just a great bait. Corkies do come in a ton of different color options. In fact, there's a lot of aftermarket painters that will paint these in all. In fact, if you look right behind me across the wall, yeah, all of those are Corky Fat Boys. I have a ton. Let me warn you though, when you get into buying these, it becomes an addiction, and you'll be like me and you'll have hundreds of them. But great bait, great for catching trout. I probably wouldn't try to catch a redfish on this because redfish will absolutely destroy these, but a lot of fun either way. All right, now I can't add the Corky Fat Boy to the list without adding, well, the Soft Dine XL or the regular Soft Dine. One of my favorite baits, probably one of the best baits if you are surf fishing. A lot of people use this. I did some videos on this as well. In fact, I caught more fish on a Soft Dine XL, more different types of fish on a Soft Dine XL than any other bait I've ever used. I have a whole video on that as well, but Soft Dine XL, easy to use. In fact, it's probably easier than the Fat Boy. It runs through the water really quickly. You can suspend this, you can, move it slow. There's just a ton that you can do with it, and it is a great lure for catching trout. I love using this, especially when I'm trying to mimic smaller bait fish, and the Fat Boy's a little bit too big. You can get this, which is the XL, and then there's a smaller version, which is just the Soft Diner. So again, these come in every color you can imagine, just like the Fat Boy does, or any of the Corkies. Yep, got to put a ton of those back there as well, but here it is, Soft Dine XL. All right, last but not least, my favorite way to catch fish, and that is on the top water. Now, when it comes to my favorite top water, there's no comparison. It is the Rapala Skitterwalk. Again, these come in a ton of different colors, make a ton of noise. Listen to that rattle. Yeah, a lot of motion in this. It's a great lure to locate fish because it makes so much noise. It's a great lure to use on top of oyster when you're getting caught up on all your jig heads. You can just kind of walk this across the top. I use this, I walk the dog with it. A lot of times I'll pause this and just kind of let it sit there for a minute, and I'll start working it again. Great lure for redfish. And if you've never caught a big redfish or a big trout on a top water, you owe it to yourself to do it, because there's nothing like it. There's nothing like those fish coming up and just smashing that top water. You can hear it, you can see the water splash. It's just so much fun. It is my favorite way to catch fish. Every morning when I go fishing, the very first thing that I'm using is the Skitterwalk. I use it all the time. And, you know, even throughout the day, sometimes if I'm, you know, trying to locate fish, again, it makes a ton of noise, has a ton of movement. It's just a great all around topwater. A lot of topwaters, you know, work just fine, but this is my favorite. I've caught more fish on the Skidder Walk than any other topwater by far. And there's just nothing like, again, having a fish blow up on a topwater. You owe it to yourself to go do that. If you haven't, you know, if you struggle with topwaters, just try to fish with it all day long, and, you know, and really get confidence in that. A lot of people, you know, they stay away from topwaters because they're intimidated by them. Now, this is a great lure that you can use in super shallow water, again, over oyster, or, you know, in the shallow marshes to locate redfish. It's also a lure that you can use in deeper water when you're, you know, targeting trout, and you get those big schools. Trout will blow up on this just like redfish will. And again, it's just a blast when fish slam topwaters. There's nothing like it. So there you have it, my top 5 favorite lures to use. They're lures that if you aren't using already, you have to give it a try this year. They're lures that you can use year round, no matter what. They work all year, just great. They're a lot of fun to use. Very versatile lures, you know. Throw them in there, throw them into your arsenal. Tell me what you think. Now, all of these lures you can get at Anglers Anonymous here in Katy. They have all of these. They have tons of different colors and different options for all of that. And if you go into Anglers, talk to Mike or Chris, tell them I sent you over there, and they will point you in the right direction. In fact, they'll, you know, if you ask them, I'm sure they'll tell you some other lures that didn't make this video that I buy pretty regularly. So they know better than anyone what I use, what I don't. So head on over to Anglers Anonymous, pick up some of these lures, give them a try this year. Tell me what you think. Tell me, you know, give me your success stories. I'd love to hear them. So, but anyway, thank you guys for watching. I really do appreciate it. If you haven't already, please subscribe, like the video, and we'll see you next time.